I am happy to be here to speak about sustainable development, a theme so close to my heart. Let me start by going back to some perspectives from my own life, journey, and political experience. The world came together in Stockholm more than 40 years ago for the first major global UN meeting on the environment. Indira Gandhi, the most forceful voice from G77, said the famous words, "Poverty is the greatest polluter." It certainly set the stage. When I was asked more than a decade later to establish and lead a new independent commission, which we named the World Commission on Environment and Development, I was profoundly aware that there was no alternative road ahead but to confront the two challenges, environment and development, in a synergistic, integrated manner. Clearly, a key concern for human development must be eradication of abject poverty and meeting the needs and rights of every human being for dignity, real choices, and a decent life. On the commission I put together, with more than half of the members coming from the developing world, we analyzed these basic links, as well as raised the new dimension of intergenerational responsibility. In our report, we called for equitable growth, one that is forceful and at the same time socially and environmentally sustainable. What really matters is the quality of growth, both in terms of promoting growth that benefits the poor, but also in terms of reducing the impact on the environment. It is what today is often referred to as the three pillars of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. The dangerous trend towards climate change and global warming was addressed in our report as a major challenge to the international community and to our common future. It was in fact dramatic enough for the world to be able to agree only 5 years later in Rio on the Climate Convention. As we all are aware, however, the world has been much too slow to seriously respond to the clear and mounting evidence before us. The type of policy changes that are needed enter directly into the core of our development patterns and the use of energy. The fact is, many countries are much too reluctant to commit to change, especially the largest emitters of greenhouse gases. To bring all countries and peoples into an era of sustainable development and progress while protecting planet Earth, only a broad and consistent approach to overcome poverty and secure dignity, human rights, health, and education for all is a viable and acceptable alternative. Over the last 20-25 years, the reality that poor people are being so much harder hit by the effects of climate change has increasingly become a key part of the discussion. Drought, combined with too much rainfall, water shortage, reduced agricultural yields, as well as increased vulnerability to shocks and natural disasters, are parts of a complex picture. Ecosystem losses due to climate change are constraining livelihood opportunities, especially for poor people. Growth patterns, both in Africa and China, still see the poor falling further behind. Many leaders now realize this can also be a source of social instability. The debate is not just about which countries have historically created the whole situation, and therefore must take action first, but also about the responsibility to support and to fund adaptation measures, not just mitigation. Inequality is a barrier to human development in the first place. Greater equity is a condition for reaching the goal of eradication of poverty and deprivation. And the added burden of climate change, again hitting the poor disproportionately, makes the large existing inequalities even worse. So I believe we need to put inequality at the heart of the agenda as we address the new Sustainable Development Goals, our future global framework. It gives some new hope that today there is a greater appreciation and more real concern about the increasing gaps within as well as between countries. At the same time, there has been considerable progress in the Human Development Index in countries across the world. However, it will not be desirable nor sustainable if these improved averages are accompanied by rising inequalities in income, unsustainable patterns of consumption, high military spending, and low social cohesion. Investing in people's capabilities, women as well as men, through health, education, job creation, and other social services, must be an integral part of any sound and sustainable development. So policy choices are at the core of the issue. To me, it is an optimistic sign that there is increasing emphasis today on this crucial fact. Because the danger relating to climate change, both affecting humanity and our one planet Earth in devastating ways, has by now been known by scientists and by decision makers for a generation. However, still, the same urgent challenges are with us, while global leaders struggle to agree on a path ahead that is realistic, just, and equitable. The situation itself illustrates the urgency of the matter, because the world is today moving towards a 4 degrees Celsius scenario, not the 2-degree one that leaders committed to already in Copenhagen. Poor countries and emerging economies are already responsible for 2/3 of global emissions, a percentage that will increase year by year. The process that was set in motion in 1992 is alive and active. Rio+20, the 20th anniversary of the landmark conference, took place 2.5 years ago. Its purpose was to take stock of the progress made since the Earth Summit and help move us toward a green economy. So while the world has improved in some areas, such as the gradual healing of the ozone layer and the number of people who have been lifted out of abject poverty, the vision of sustainable development at a global scale remains unmet. In particular, environmental degradation continues and is in some cases accelerating. So we now urgently need to step up the pace of change. The UN Secretary General has made sustainable development a top priority for his second 5-year term. His high-level panel on global sustainability, on which I had the honor to serve, presented its report in the run-up to Rio+20. And we made clear that the current global development model is unsustainable. We can no longer assume that our collective actions will not trigger tipping points as environmental thresholds are breached, risking irreversible damage to both ecosystems and human communities. We all need to recognize that the drivers of that challenge include unsustainable lifestyles, production and consumption patterns, and the impact of population growth. As the global population grows from 7 billion to 9 billion by 2040, with the emergence, and think about that, of 3 billion new middle-class consumers over the next 20 years, the demand for resources will rise exponentially. By 2030, the world will need at least 50% more food, 45% more energy, and 30% more water. Our panel strongly emphasized a critical point for our common future: the need to always measure and to price what matters. The marketplace has to reflect the full ecological and human costs of economic decisions and establish price signals that make transparent the consequences, both of action and of inaction. And what does that mean? Pollution, including carbon emissions, can no longer be free. Subsidies should be made transparent. They should be phased out for fossil fuels by 2020. And we must build new measures, ways to measure development beyond GDP. Now, ironically, nearly word for word, these are recommendations that we had presented in the World Commission report back in 1987. Also then, we pointed to the need for science to allow for a more informed and integrated decision-making. This is essential for decision makers to share the knowledge upon which to act. The debate about human activities and global warming should now be behind us, as the evidence is even stronger in the last IPCC report. Effects of climate change are already occurring on all continents and across the oceans, from the tropics to the poles, from small islands to large continents, from the poorest to the wealthiest countries. Climate change will shift precipitation patterns and increase melting of glaciers, thereby altering water supplies, intensifying floods and droughts. Climate change is affecting agriculture, water resources, human health, and ecosystems on land and in the oceans. It poses immense risks for economic stability and the security of nations. This is why it is essential that governments complete their work on a new universal climate agreement in 2015. Nations are still thinking too much on a national, not a global basis. We need even more emphasis on building common understanding among individuals across all national borders. As young people through social media are accessing knowledge and reality, issues affecting their future lives and security, I believe the basis for popular pressure and demand for consolidated action can be built. So I still choose to remain optimistic. And I believe we can make some key observations. Nothing moves fast enough or strongly enough if the United States is not one of the driving forces. It is also true very little of any consequence will happen if China, India, and other important emerging economies do not engage for results. International decision-making is based on consensus. This will often lead to frustrating situations. Those who want the least decide the most. Fortunately, today there are several good signs of large and emerging economies like China taking important action to promote public health, a cleaner use of energy, and efforts to reduce dangerous emissions. The world took note some months ago when US and China, together responsible for nearly half of global emissions, announced their commitment to take action and be part of a global solution. It will make it less attractive for reluctant countries to choose to line up behind one or both of those major players as an excuse for their own inaction. Today, among countries, only the European Union has a decision-making structure that can be sharp, effective, and sometimes based on majority vote. No doubt, this reality has also made it possible for Europe to be in the lead, having reduced emissions by 20% since 1990. I again will underline that 2015 is a crucial year for global foresight and collaboration. New York in September and Paris in December will be two key crossroads this year, a real test of political will, leadership, and shared responsibility. They will test our ability both to face up to the real dangers of climate change and to agree on sustainable development goals, which will underline our common responsibilities for the safety and the well-being of the present and future generations, as well as for our one planet Earth. The fact that these two processes, climate and sustainable development, are now running in parallel gives us new strength and shows how greater awareness has been shared across the world. I think we all know that energy is key. Without energy, no development. Without sustainable energy, no sustainable development. Business, until recently, underestimated climate risk. But without climate security, there cannot be food, water, or energy security. And without that, there cannot be stability. Without stability, business cannot invest and thrive. Here in the Pearl River Delta, we are in an emerging mega city of nearly 60 million people, characterized by the World Bank as the largest urban area in the world, both in size and population. Development patterns in this region will indeed influence not just the millions living here, but the impact on a larger global scale for the future of humanity and its relationship with planet Earth. The Chinese Ministry of Environment has reported this is the most polluted area of the country, both for air and for water. At the same time, however, I have been informed that 7 of the 10 cities that have the best air quality in China are located here in the Pearl River Delta, according to reports from January this year. No doubt there are great challenges, and clearly policies, such as here in Macau, need to be put in place toward the already stated goal, a green, low-carbon city. Now, I said energy is crucial. Water, food, and energy are all essential components of sustainable development. They clearly have a human rights perspective and are basic for health and for abating poverty. Urbanization is continuing and illustrates the need for city planning, including all areas of human settlement. There are many cities, including here in Asia, that are working hard to promote a sustainable future. Happily, there is today a competition going on to show initiative and results for better cities in the area of public transportation, energy solutions, and building practices. For a long time, too much emphasis was put on public financing and development assistance alone. There is no way to secure the enormous investments that are needed following this way of thinking alone. Public money should be a part of the best investments and can inspire good solutions made by the private sector. However, public decision-making, governmental regulation, and determination to direct the change we need is essential. This means international as well as national and local plans of action. Only this way, and by global collaboration, will we see the private resources coming forward in a manner that is consistent with an approach to a safe and sustainable future. So today, many now realize and recognize that limited public funds must be used strategically as incentives to unlock greater private investment flows, to share risks, and expand access to the building blocks of prosperity, including modern energy services. And this means taking advantage of the vast potential that lies in maximization of resource productivity, especially with respect to energy and water, and reducing waste. It means investing in sustainable technologies that will create jobs and support the poor, will improve health and education, and build more resilient and equitable societies. I want to observe also that women are now increasingly acknowledged as a vital force for growth and for sustainable development. Countries and companies with higher levels of gender equality have faster growth and better performance. We have the knowledge, the data, and the experience to prove that this is the case, and that those who remain stuck in patriarchal patterns of economic life will lose, and lose badly. As we face the great and growing dangers of climate change, we also face the economic opportunity and the trends towards a global transition to sustainable energy. It is an optimistic sign that renewable prices are going down. Volumes of new investment are impressing, not least in emerging markets. So, as the world struggles to get on the same page as to the correct share of responsibility of action, and in spite of this increase in demand, prices for turbines and solar panels have been falling, making these solutions more affordable and more competitive. Business now calls for much more government action to inspire innovation and the solutions to reach a sustainable world. Public policies are needed to stimulate markets, to remove barriers, to level the playing field, and to establish clear objectives and targets for renewable energy and energy efficiency. It also means we must urgently turn around the widespread and paradoxical policies still rampant across the world, subsidies for fossil fuels that give additional incentives for their use, a policy that goes in the opposite direction of what we need. Just imagine the critical need for change when you realize that subsidies for fossil fuels are 6 times higher globally than those that are directed towards renewable energy. In fact, annual subsidies for established fossil fuels are estimated to cost around $500 billion worldwide. India is today using 14% of its federal budget for subsidies of gasoline prices, $43 billion. Now, these are resources that could be channeled to clean, low-cost, sustainable energy technologies, as well as to social programs to benefit the poor, such as sustainable solutions for improved access to clean water. And to ensure that vulnerable groups are not hurt as subsidies recede, we can look to countries like Indonesia that have implemented poverty alleviation and social protection programs in combination with fossil fuel subsidy reform. Certainly that access to energy is increasingly a recognized driver of development. The Secretary General has made energy access a core priority of his second term in office, which in the words of the Secretary General is the golden thread that connects development, social inclusion, and environmental protection. Unbelievably, in sub-Saharan Africa alone, an estimated 200,000 health clinics lack electricity, and women give birth at night beneath dim and dirty kerosene lamps. Addressing such an energy gap is an example of a particularly ripe target for an innovative blend of philanthropy, investment, and government support. It is hard to believe that a decade into the 21st century, exposure to indoor air pollution from the use of wood, dung, and coal for cooking and home heating is still one of the world's biggest public health challenges. Yet 2.7 billion people still use these fuels, and more than 1 billion people have no access to electricity. But globally, the good news is that the production and deployment of renewable energy is gaining much speed. In the last couple of years, we have also heard increasing calls for fossil fuel divestment, not least in the case of coal, not only for environmental reasons, but based on the investment risks that are involved. First, coal assets are threatened by attractive renewables, which are already penetrating the market. Regulatory measures are also curbing the demand for coal. Stricter environmental controls across the globe have resulted in a rising number of coal plants retiring early, as they also have limited the feasibility of opening new plants. Now, Asia's energy needs will double over the next 20 years. This certainly illustrates the fundamental need to decouple this new era of growth from growth in CO2 emissions, while ensuring universal access to sustainable energy. Today, there is increasing awareness of the urgency of putting a real price on coal, on carbon. Continuing our traditional system of free riders has to stop. It is unacceptable and unsustainable that producers and consumers do not pay for or account for the real cost of burning fossil fuels. But today we see that governments are also taking action. In 2014, about 40 national and more than 20 subnational jurisdictions have already implemented or scheduled emission trading systems or carbon taxes, accounting for more than 22% of global emissions. Many more are preparing for pricing carbon. Together, they represent almost half of global emissions for global warming. Business increasingly is aware that carbon pricing is the most efficient and cost-effective means of reducing emissions, leading them to voice their support for carbon pricing. Due to the large present gap of at least 6 billion tons CO2 equivalents between the global ambitions for reductions by 2020 and the reality of what countries are so far planning for, reforms on fossil fuel subsidies will be a high priority contribution. We all know that partnerships will be crucial to deal with the dangers of climate change and to promote a green economy and sustainable development. So I want to underline that the traditional separation between the public and private sector is becoming increasingly irrelevant as our societies realize how interdependent we all are in a world with mounting common challenges and threats. Not just the public and the voluntary sectors, but also the business community must be socially and globally responsible. We are all in this together as individuals and as representatives of civil society. And we will all benefit from the many large and small decisions taken by businesses and companies who look beyond the short-term perspective as they choose investments and solutions for the future. These are the actors and the innovators we will see succeed. They will prove to be the heroes of the younger generation. I conclude I remain optimistic. Advances in science have given us a better understanding of climate and ecosystem risks. Billions of people, also in developing countries, are socially connected by technologies that have shrunk the world and expanded the notion of a global neighborhood. And reserving prosperity and security only for a select few simply is not possible. As long as we all live on the same planet, there is no alternative path ahead unless we all can achieve sustainable development. Thank you so much.